So today we have our friend here, Andrew Astleford, and Andrew, you can take it away and introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for coming out, everyone. And yeah, it's just an honor to spend some time with you today. And this is a topic breaking into content design and especially managing career transitions that's really close to my heart and that I'm passionate about. As you can kind of see with my bio here, I didn't anticipate going on this path. I never thought I would be a content designer or work in tech. I wanted to be a narrative journalist, someone who wrote magazine length stories or worked at a newspaper and wrote like narrative stories I'd run as Sunday centerpieces, things like that. I want to be a sports writer in particular. So yeah, I've taken a winding path to where I am currently, but I think my journey, I hope you find some inspiration in it, no matter where you are in life or what direction you hope to go, that you don't have to have everything planned out. You don't have to be like, I need to be at point A in 10 years or have this destination in mind, this fixed thing. I've learned in life, we go in a lot of different directions and sometimes we're pushed in different directions and we discover things that we never would have imagined that we could have done years ago. So anyway, yeah, that's a little bit about my background. I grew up in Kansas in the United States here. I went to Missouri for journalism. I was a sports writer for about 8, 9 years. I was able to do columns and long form stories, and I appeared on TV and some radio shows too. But then I had a few layoffs, and I really hit a point in my life where I was like, what do I want to do next? So I'm going to continue living this life where job security isn't great. And even if I do get another job, I have to move to another city and pick up everything and start over elsewhere. And I just reached a point where I was like, I just don't want to do that anymore. I want more stability. I want to stay in my current city. Atlanta, Georgia is where my last layoff happened for journalism. And I just decided to stay here because I just didn't want to move anymore because I've moved to a lot of different states and places. And so ended up staying here and starting in tech, and that's what I've done since 2018. Really fortunate to kind of fall into this life, and I think that's one thing I'd just like to express to all of you is that yeah, just be open to new opportunity, even if it's not being a UX writer, content designer. Just keep your eyes open, keep your imagination open, and know that you can accomplish things that you might not even know you can do yet. I didn't know I could do this. I kind of learned on the job and I'm still learning every day. But I think I was just kind of like eyes wide open and just kind of maybe naive about it all. But that naivety helped and helped me grow in the field. And now I'm 5 years into it and definitely like so glad I discovered this new path. So yeah, that's where I am now. I enjoy writing, sharing knowledge, hiking, sports, and wine. And then I wrote a little essay down below. Maybe you all can share these slides after we're done. There's a link to an essay I wrote just about my path and the layoffs I experienced and my former dreams and now where I am currently. And I just want you to know that, like, we don't have complete control over our professional lives. Things happen and financial things happen and the world happens and it may push us in different directions. But that's okay. And know you're not a failure if you have to change direction. And if anything, you're a success story because you're brave enough to go in a different direction and experience something new. So that's a little bit about my path. And I'm happy to answer your questions today and take part in this.
Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And it's what I really like about your content and the content that you share is that you allow yourself to be very vulnerable and sharing and almost like journaling
Yeah.
your path and looking back it's also aged really well, when a senior content designer talk about their next dream job in 2019 and then actually finding that the dream job. So that's pretty cool. And here you have Andrew's LinkedIn. Also, I'll share it in the chat, and also I will share the slides with you so you could have them. There are some questions right now in the Q&A. Everyone feel free to drop your questions over there, and we'll go ahead and talk about it. So we will start. Okay, so I have a question about from anonymous attendee. The question is, I'm completing a business analytics post-grad degree in December next year, but I'm looking to transition into UX writing positions after I'm done. What would be top tips to be successful at that?
That's a great question. And that's a great background to business analytics, because as I'm finding out in my current job and previous jobs I've had too, analytics drives so much of what we do as content designers or just UX professionals in general. We're always looking for ways to measure things and find out the why behind our various hypotheses out there. So anyway, like trying to break into the field, I think I would definitely like emphasize that background of business analytics and what you've learned. And I think this is just general advice for anyone with any background, but especially in the current market and the current state of things, like just try to find some kind of job where you're working within like a digital experiences. It doesn't have to be labeled like a content designer role or a UX writer role or content strategist role. Like if you're designing experiences within a digital interface or working on a website or even a knowledge base or working on support articles, you're doing content design to some degree. So I think one of the biggest lessons I can share today is just kind of expand your definition of what a content designer is or what content design is, and try to find anywhere you can to allow you to do that kind of work, whether it's freelance or even on your own with some, free exercises out there or courses that you can enroll in. Yeah, just try to find any kind of experience you can, and then keep your mind open to other opportunities, even non-traditional opportunities that may be out there, because that can really help you as you try to find a full-time job or a different job later. But yeah, as far as that particular question with the business analytics background, that's great. I would definitely emphasize that in interviews, on the resume, and just sell that background as like, I know how to measure data, I know how to frame things in a way that would be good for the business and things like that. So I think that's a great background to have for someone who's interested in content design.
I agree. I think that someone that have the ability to connect user needs to business goals through good communication would be an amazing content designer. And if you really know how to craft that business analytics and the data and look in the numbers and then put KPIs that are measurable to it, and then write some content that help your company basically to reach there, I think that could be very helpful. So I agree about the fact that it's might be a very interesting background for a content designer. But I will follow up and ask, um, what tip would you give to a person like that, just fresh out of college?
Mhm.
You know the market right now. There are many
Yeah.
talents
Mhm.
out there, not as many roles as in 2022,
Yeah,
where we
exactly.
had like more opportunities. I'd say right now there are also opportunities from where I sit, but what would be your tip for this person or everyone basically to stand out and get a job?
Yeah, maybe I can talk about my own personal experience in a way, because I think it's kind of timeless in some ways what happened to me. So my job, I was fortunate to fall into it because of someone I knew at the company who was a product manager. And so kind of having a connection to break through in the interview process really helped me. And I wonder a lot when I think back to my path, if I would have been able to get a job at that company and even learn about and get into content design without that kind of tie to the company. So I think like, I know it's kind of like tired sometimes to hear that say like networking is important, but I truly believe in a tight market and a very competitive market. It really does come down to like having people know who you are sometimes, or having some kind of way to break through the initial screening phase and get an interview. That's what happened. I mean, once you get the interview, it's on your own, and you have to tell your story effectively and explain why your skills from maybe another profession or industry would translate well into a content designer role. And there are a lot of reasons why anyone could make the transition if you worked cross-functionally before. But I think sometimes the hardest part is just breaking through and having someone call you back and be like, yes, we're interested, let's have an interview. So I think it does help sometimes if you like reach out to recruiters or you talk to someone at the company you're interested in, and think small too, like you're trying to break in, like I know sometimes there's a temptation to like look at the big companies or companies that people like talk about a lot. But my first job in content design was at a company with like 200 employees or something like that. It was a great place to cut my teeth, and it provided that opportunity to break in. And I'm so thankful for that setting that I began in a few years ago. So I'd consider something similar if you're interested, especially with the market we have now. I just think specifically maybe places that are looking for talent where you live, and open to someone, a good nurturing environment too, where they could teach you things, and find a hiring manager who it's like a teacher-like figure and really empathetic. I think that's so important as you're breaking into. So those are some of the tips just off the top of my head that I would kind of stress to people as they're trying to break through, not only in the current market, but even later when it gets better. I think it really does help if you think about specific situations that are just really good teaching environments, and will kind of set you on the right path going forward with your content design career.
That's great. I feel like if we talk about some kind of funnel, even there are two steps of this funnel. One is to actually land the interview, and the other part is to tell your story. And
Mm-hmm.
those would be considered to be two different tests for you as an individual. And for landing that interview, recommend to reach out to someone in the company. Think more. I think those are great ideas. I can follow up and say, to see who is hiring in your area, and maybe look on LinkedIn for UX folks in that company. Maybe reach out on LinkedIn, ask for advice. That could be share your portfolio. That could be a good experience. It also worked for me in the past, so definitely I would check it out as well. All right, Lindsay Wagner, happy to have you here. You're in Cape Town, and there aren't many content design job opportunities here. Any advice on how to build a career in UX as a content designer?
That's a great question. I don't know if I have like a, 100% great answer for this, because I just was fortunate to kind of like work at companies that had content design teams and UX positions available. But I really respect some people I follow on LinkedIn and elsewhere online who kind of like create their own path, and kind of like word of mouth do work for people and do content design work just on their own, like kind of creating this business in a way, for content design work. And I think that's possible for people who are really ambitious and interested in, reaching out and kind of creating opportunities for themselves. I will say, like, I think there are, in a place like Cape Town, there are probably opportunities that maybe aren't labeled like UX jobs or content designer jobs, like I mentioned earlier, but companies where you might work on like email campaigns, even, or just, working on a website or improving things for someone, in some digital experience. And that would be worth exploring, I believe, and just try to see if you can find those opportunities that might not stand out as like, obvious UX positions. So yeah, I think that if I were in your position, because I know I couldn't run my own business or do freelancing that well, I think I would try to explore that angle of things and see, like, even like knowledge-based teams and things related to support and help content out there. There might be opportunities at companies related to that. So I think it's just about expanding your imagination about what this job can be, and getting experience however you can, and then adding to your portfolio and having that early work and build toward another opportunity. That's what I've learned in my years. It's just like each opportunity kind of builds toward what's next. And that's exciting. And so I think however you can get your foot in the door and doing that work, whether it's a UX job or a content designer job, you should do it, because that'll pay off later, and you can show people that you can do the work because of that experience that you've had.
That's awesome. I think that maybe positioning yourself as a full stack writer or a full stack UX person, and that can, as Andrew said, maybe tackle the email marketing funnel, which, by the way, is an experience, right? Inside of a digital app, you have emails, and people experience them, go back to the app. Maybe you want them to download an app. Maybe you write a long form blog post, and then you design some content afterwards. So in every type of writing, there's a lot of components that are very similar to UX writing, where you have to think about your readers, you have to think about what, like, be very empathic about them, and and write for them where they are right now, which is similar, exactly like UX writing. So that's another trend I've been seeing lately, and I'd love to have your take, Andrew, is the fractional workers. So it's not being a freelance necessarily, it's being like having like 3, 4 main clients. I don't see it only in
Mm.
UX. I see like fractional CMOs,
Hmm.
people that work as like CMO for like 3 startup companies or 4 startup companies, give ton of value to all of them. They actually like contractors in those companies, and they are fractional workers. Have you heard about this term before?
I haven't in this context. I was actually like a full-time contract worker in my previous career, which sounds similar. Where I wasn't like a full-time employee with benefits, but I did full-time work and only work for that particular company. But is that something similar then, where it's like you're technically a freelancer legally, or what's that like?
Um, so so not exactly.
Okay.
Of course, being a contractor without the terms, that's how you start. Sometime I also
Yeah.
started with something similar like that. But I'm talking about maybe having like 2 or 3 clients as a contractor. So work two
Gotcha.
days in that company and 2 days in that company,
Oh,
and being
gotcha.
being like
Mhm.
a fractional worker. It's just like a trend I've
Interesting.
been following in the past few
Wow.
months.
That's really interesting. I wonder what the context switching is like and something like that. Because I assume like not only are you context switching between specific assignments with those companies, but then you have to jump to a completely different company. So yeah, I admire people who do that. That's great. Yeah.
It's uh, it's challenging. It's just like freelancing and having a few clients in the same time,
Mhm.
and only for um, also high level tasks like you lead the UX writer, which is a fractional worker, and then they are in charge of all of the UX writing in that company because maybe the company don't have the privilege to hire a full-time UX writer.
Oh,
So they could
gotcha.
have like a UX writing leader for 2 days, and it will be like a fractional worker. Anyway, um, I think freelancing and fractional workers are it's something that's getting a bit more trendy lately, and
Nice.
not even trendy, but something that happens a lot. And maybe if you don't have, and this is an answer to Lindsay, if you don't see many opportunities in your city, you can consider uh, either taking a small freelance project or at least try to offer some, I don't know, like something I like to do. And this is, I can put my freelancer hat because I was freelancer in the world of UX for many years. And and freelancers are people that actually need to run businesses and not only to do the actual work, which is challenging. Not everybody are capable to do that. But if you feel like you are capable to do that, I would recommend maybe to offer companies in your area and maybe a free UX writing audit or like 20 minutes talk where you just give them suggestions after you've analyzed their flow. And uh, by doing that, you'll have some kind of a foot in the door and they will see your value. And then you could maybe land a small project. What I like to do is sell a bank of hours in that scenario. So I say something like, okay, if you like the past 30 minutes or 20 minutes, well, I give you useful tips for a very specific user flow. And how about doing a small project and try to define this project the best you can? It's really difficult to estimate. Okay, we have a user flow and it will take me 10 hours. It's difficult, but you can say, listen, we can have a bank of hours. Our hourly rate is $100 for an hour. And I can guarantee I will give you the best I can in those 20 or 10 hours, but whatever you decide to do with them. And we will try to tackle this specific user flow in a ballpark of 10 to 20 hours. And then it's really easy for the client to kind of budget for that and hire you. And they already saw your value beforehand because you gave them that free session. So that's how I would sell to companies in my area that are not necessarily hiring right now. It's a bit of a hustle. Not everybody would like to do that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
but that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Nice. That's really interesting. I had no idea. That's fascinating.
Right. So thank you for the question. And it was, I think it's good to have like two different takes on this question. Okay. Jason Das is here asking, when creating UX writing case study, because it's writing, should you show previous draft to show where you started and got to?
That's a great question. I think it's fair to do that. It's sometimes like I'll show a before and after in my case studies where it's actually like the experience before I started working on it and then the ultimate improvement. Then I'll include any data involved with what my improvement did as far as like business impact. So that's how I'll approach things. But I have shown some screens of just like exploratory work and all the work that went involved in Figma of like taking screenshots of like competitive analysis and other things out there and showing kind of multi-step process of getting to that endpoint. So yeah, I think it's fair to show something like that. And you can show your thought process too, going from point A to point B to point C. So yeah, I will say not all my case studies are like that. All certain ones I'll kind of show like the ultimate evolution of the project, but sometimes I'll just show like what the experience was before, if there was an existing experience, and then the ultimate improvement. And then I'll try to show some data related to that or the impact of the work and talk about like who I worked with, cross-functional partners, and then kind of like what my role was within the ultimate project and how we got to that point of positive impact for the business. So yeah, I think it's always really fascinating going through a journey with a project that you, especially that you include within your portfolio that you're proud of, because when you look back on it, you'll see the growth from beginning to end with the experience, and it does kind of shape you in a lot of ways. There's some pieces in my portfolio that are still from my first UX job. Look back on that, and it's like, wow, I really grew with that experience, and think back to like the early versions of that work, and then kind of like the progression of it over time. So yeah, I think it's fair game. I wouldn't overdo it because it could be kind of maybe a distraction a little bit if you're presenting the work, but I think it adds good context sometimes in specific situations if you include some of your work and kind of rough versions of it, and then kind of show how you got to the endpoint, and maybe explain like who you worked with to get to that endpoint and what stakeholders were involved, they gave feedback, things like that. So as with anything, it's kind of like a a lot of people involved in a multi-part process, but I think it could be good to include that in the portfolio.
I agree. And Jason, without having iterations and before and after within your own project, okay, let me try to recap my thoughts. What I want to say is that design is an iterative process, means that you will always have better and improved versions of your design and you build your design process. And if you could present, and as Andrew said, you're not always going to have that before, because sometimes that experience wouldn't even exist. You could, so if you could add before and after, it will give a lot of value to give more context for the people that actually view your portfolio and what this project was like, and so on. It's also a really cool timestamp for you to see like how you grew, just like Andrew said. So I love your answer, Andrew. I see that Mikhail asked, I'd like advice for transitioning from other careers, particularly when building a portfolio, and it is not extensive yet. Thanks.
That's a great question. I actually didn't have any UX work when I made my transition. I will admit I wouldn't advise that these days. I think there are opportunities with free exercises online or courses to show that you have an awareness of the field and that you've done the work before. So I would say like try to do that if you can, if you're breaking in completely new. But my process was I showed my journalism pieces to the hiring manager actually for my first content design job, and kind of talked about like who I worked with in those pieces and tried to paint it as like a cross-functional collaboration with these different experiences, and that could translate then to the UX world where you're working cross-functionally all the time with different stakeholders. So as I've continued in this field, I've seen a lot of parallels between almost any job where you work with other people and then what you do in UX. There's a lot of cross-functional work that translates to this life. And so if you're trying to transition from another career, think about those instances where you are working with other people and maybe you've had to bring someone over to your frame of thought. If they were resistant at first, that's something that could be interesting to talk about. Talk about how you communicated throughout the process and getting things across and getting a project across the finish line. So that's important. But yeah, and any kind of like deliverable that you can show related to that work, I think would be good. But I will say, like in this day and age with how competitive it is, since I've broken this, I think it would be good to kind of like have some kind of UX work to show and awareness of this field just to kind of bolster your candidacy for a job. You can still talk about those other experiences, like I said, with your other career. But then you could also talk about the work that you're trying out with the UX work too, and talk about like how you've thought about those specific problems, and if you worked with anyone within those experiences, how you worked with those stakeholders and were influenced by that. That would be good. So that would just be some advice off the top of my head for those specific situations. Oh, I think you might be on mute, Yuval.
All right. So as a UX writer, this is a good question in my opinion. Should you disclose if AI was used in editing your UX writing?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I've never thought about that before. We were talking
Me
about
too.
AI. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I think like, to some extent, yes, maybe you could talk about the tools you use and their process. If you have it in a case study, that would be something I'd bring up in my case study as far as like if I just like used it straight up as an AI output, like I'd say I used whatever tool I used to get to that point, maybe. But I will say, like in my job, I have used, like we were talking about earlier, like WordTune and Grammarly, things like that, to kind of like fine tune things or to like think about writing things in a different way. So I'll take like whatever those tools suggested and maybe change things, and that's something that, I probably wouldn't mention. Just it's kind of a minor edit from my end, but yeah, I think that's a great question. I think like honesty is always best if you're like using something completely that you didn't come up with on your own. But I think that's a question other people might have different opinions on. I'd love to hear them actually, and I think I don't know completely like what the right answer is to this. Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's more of an ethical question, I'd say. And I think this discussion is like bigger than the portfolio discussion or the UX writing discussion. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, so there is some kind of a craft over here that was made by AI partially or completely. We don't know that. And should we put some kind of a stamp? Hey, this tool, this product, this whatever we're creating, this case study was created by AI. And I would say if it was completely created by AI, it would probably suck. It's probably not
Yeah,
going
good
to be
point.
good.
Yeah, that's true.
And someone would say, okay, so that's like BS. Like I don't think it's good. For now, I don't know how it's going to be like in the future. And if you used in editing your UX writing, so I use AI to edit my stuff all the time. I'm not a native English speaker. I'm a Hebrew native speaker, and English is my second language, as some might understand from the way I speak, talk, and so on. So I use WordTune or Grammarly a lot. I also have this very constant prompt that I use in ChatGPT, which is please proofread and rewrite this text for me
Oh,
and
nice. Yeah.
generate 2 or 3 more options for it, like 2 free rewrites for that
Mm-hmm.
text. And when I get those rewrites, they usually suck. And I usually stick to my content that was proofread by AI. And I would definitely consider it to be my content.
Mm-hmm.
Only used AI for the spell check and grammar check and all of those. And in my opinion, it's not worth mentioning the fact that I used AI tools for that. Another thing I want to say is that when doing professional work, unlike us creative might think sometimes, it's not like a piece of art. So it's not that okay, right now we used an image generator and like we put it as a piece of art to put it on the wall. Most of the time, you're going to use these tools professionally to create some kind of an outcome that would be relevant for commercial use. So as a person that is recruiting someone and that someone say to me, hey, I used AI to produce stuff as 5 times as I could before that, I would say, okay, that's perfect. And I'd love it if someone would actually know how to use AI, and it will be good if the case study is actually good, and I would be impressed by it, by the fact that that person could actually use AI. So I don't know. That's just my random sporadic takes on that topic. Okay. Adam Sher is asking, can you later move from content design to product design or design, or is content design is too different and people get typecast in that role? I love all of these fields and I want to think about future options when deciding my next step.
Oh, that's a great question. I will say no, I don't think you'll get typecast in the role. I think like being a content designer, you're a product designer, just works with words. So I think that transition, if you're interested in making it, would be really interesting and intellectually stimulating even. So yeah, I work with product designers all the time. And in my current role in particular, I've noticed like I've really grown in thinking about the overall kind of like experience as just just holistic design and like working with a product designer on even like thinking about hierarchy and colors and moving around different components and things like that. So I think there are a lot of similarities there, and it's not too different to have to stay in content design forever. And it's really interesting too, the progression I've seen as I've advanced in this field a little bit. You see a lot of product designers too get interested in product management. Even I've worked with a few product designers who've become PMs at companies too. So if you're really interested in kind of the overall business of a software company and the product development process, there's a pretty straight line, I believe, from like content design and product design to like product management, and people can move on to different areas from there if they're interested. So never feel like you're boxed into one particular area with content design. If you're a content designer, I think the opportunities are there if you're interested to kind of like expand your knowledge with using Figma and different things, and advance your thinking there, and then make a full transition into being a product designer or even moving into a PM eventually if you're interested in that aspect of things. So that's what I've noticed so far. It's pretty interesting.
All right, thank you, Adam, for that question. Daniel is asking, I'm a copywriter looking to slightly pivot my career right now for hopefully some more job security in the future. Coming from a writing background, a UX writing role seems like a natural pivot. Are UX writers still sought after, or is writing being put on the designers more now to reduce staff? And I will follow up that question afterwards, and I will ask if you think that there is a difference between UX writing and content design.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I think this is really interesting, and it probably depends on the situation whether UX writers are being let go. I mean, anyone who's followed the industry recently knows that that's been happening at certain companies, and I think you really have to kind of think about and find companies that value this discipline and see the value it brings to the overall design process and product as a whole. So I won't paint like a rosy picture and say that teams haven't been affected, and this one hasn't been affected by a lot of layoffs. But I will say, like, there are places, and I'm at one right now, where the discipline is valued a lot. And if anything, we need more content designers, and that's a discussion we're having. And at other places too that I've heard that we just need more of us out there as companies see the value that we bring and the different perspective and kind of outlook we have on the design process, like they buy in, and that's important. So I'd say it's kind of a mixed bag right now for sure. I think product designers in those cases where UX writers are being laid off, yeah, they're being asked to write more and to work without a UX writer. So that's really interesting and not great, but I think eventually, like, the smart companies will see the value that we bring, and there'll be jobs for content designers into the future. So it's just a matter of educating yourself about what those places are. And I'd encourage anyone to really like study the past year and a half and see like who's laid off content design teams and kind of think about that, and kind of like if you're thinking about your career path, like considering whether those places, if there's another economic downturn, whether it might be a great place to work, things like that. So that's something I try to keep in mind, and it's been really interesting this past year following various situations and trying to find places that value content design.
And do you think that there is a difference in the terminology UX writing and content design? Because some companies call it UX writing, some companies call it content design, and some call it UX content. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've heard that in various forms too before, and I think this is just my opinion, but a content designer has a job where it's like a holistic kind of like content creation job where you're like working with emails or maybe help articles or other content experiences within a company's content ecosystem. And the UX writer to me is more focused on the micro copy or the words within a UI, things like that. A content designer might do UX writing, of course, but they'll do writing in other areas too within a company's ecosystem. So that's kind of my view on maybe the difference between a content designer and a UX writer. It's kind of subtle if you try to break it apart a little bit, but to me, the content design is a larger umbrella where even maybe you'll work on videos like I did at one point, or other areas of content creation, where a UX writer to me is someone who's embedded within product teams, working with a product designer, product manager, to work within Figma or other design tools to create digital experiences. So yeah, that's kind of my view on the two definitions.
Very cool. My view is that I feel like in some companies they call it UX writing, but they actually mean content design. In some companies they call it content design, but they actually mean UX writing.
Yeah.
Some companies call it content design, but they actually mean like different type of content. So it's a bit jargony in my opinion right now, which is ironic for us when we're the worst people. We need to
I know
to find the right words.
Yeah, exactly. This is my
It's
first job
interesting.
where I've been called a content designer. I was UX content strategist before, so I mean, like but I'm doing the same work, so the titles change, but it's kind of the same
Right.
shape of a job. Yeah.
In Meta, they had a Facebook. They had a content strategy team, and then like one day in 2021, it changed to the content design team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it seemed like a lot of people once that happened, a lot of companies started changing it to content design a few years ago around that same time. So it's been interesting to see the progression of the job titles over time and how that's evolved.
I agree. I will take a few more questions. Okay. And and we have so many, by the way. We have
Yeah, this is
like
great.
48 more.
I know. I was actually wondering, is it possible to save the questions? I was going to answer them on LinkedIn over time if it's possible to like export these somehow. I wasn't sure, but yeah, I was curious about that.
That's a very good question. That's a very, very good question. I will try to save them before that. Yes, I can. I
Okay.
see that I can
Great.
copy them. So we'll copy them for a document, and I will. Don't worry, we will tackle
Oh,
them over
that's
time.
great. Yeah, that's awesome. Because some people sent me before this too on LinkedIn, so I want to answer those as well. So yeah, I appreciate all the questions. It's fantastic. It's a great response.
Okay, that's awesome. So we'll move to the next question by Paula. Before we do that, I want to take a few minutes to speak about the UX Writing Academy, which is something that we're doing at the UX Writing Hub for the past, I'd say, 5 years, since 2018. And so I'll share my screen real quick, and then we could go back to the questions. So the UX Writing Academy is a program that I've built 5 years ago. We've seen that there is a lot of demand for some kind of a program that will help people to get into the field of UX writing. And it's split to 4 main parts. So the first part is the UX Writing Bootcamp, where you learn about the psychology of UX writing, and you learn about the role of the UX writer and the content designer within the product design process. Then we learn about building your own content style guide, and a lot of good stuff. User journey, all of the design principles, the laws of UX, and then you work on a capstone project. And after that, you get to work on a real industry project with a team of 4 to 5 writers from your cohort. It's a cohort-based program. It's very intimate. You get to work with a very specific and small amount of people, and you get to work with a mentor. So there is a mentor that gives you feedback in every step of the way on all of your assignments, which is very valuable to get that person that will hold your hand in every step of the way, give you feedback on your assignments. As an educator myself, I believe in project-based learning. So we've based all of this program to be project-based learning. And yeah, you have around 20 different drill down exercises. You submit it to your mentor. The mentor give you feedback on all of your assignments. Then you have the capstone assignment, which is a very big project. And then you have the real industry project. So a lot of projects that can go to your portfolio afterwards. After the course end, we help you to structure it as case studies in your portfolio. And you get to meet with me for career support. I help you to, we can even do like mock interviews. And basically my goal, my personal goal is to help you to get a job in this field, and you get evergreen access to it and so on until you find a job, like evergreen access, but you get our support until you find a job, which is important. That's our goal, to help you to land that project. Yeah, and we have added some really cool stuff, new content. So the generative AI content, helping you to learn how to use AI tools within your UX process. We teach you how to use Figma, which is the design tool that most UX writers use today. And if not Figma, so a similar tool to Figma. So learning Figma is a good base, and access to the Career Lab. And that's more or less about that. Because it's Black Friday, so we have 10% discount for the next week. So you get 10% discount, which is great. And that's our mentors, by the way. So you get to work with one of our mentors. There are many, many people from all over the world. So no matter where you are in the world, we try to set you up with someone from your country, make it easier for you. And that's about it. So 10% discount if you put UXW10, and I would write it right here. UX writing credit 10, and that's about it. We're getting started in January. So the 8th of January, you can go to the link that I've just shared with you, and there you can download the syllabus, and then you'll see the timeline. And that's about it. I'm not going to answer too many questions about that, but you could shoot me a message on LinkedIn or even on WhatsApp if you're interested. That's my WhatsApp number. And hold on. There you go. And yeah, shoot a question. I'm very accessible to our students. Everyone could answer me, could ask me any question they want, and I will answer promptly. And that's about it. Thank you for sticking and hearing about this program. Now we'll take more questions. Thank you. All right. And so we have a question from Paula. Tell us about an opinion regarding the way the sector operates that has changed since you started working in content design until now.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think the expectations are a little higher for content designers now, or it's just like we've gone past the like, what is a content designer to like, okay, how can you impact the business and just make the design process better at your company? So something I've really enjoyed in my current role is just how included I am in a lot of business discussions actually with like our VP in one of the areas I support with engineering. I feel like I'm pretty lucky in that regard to kind of hear those discussions with kind of the impact of the features we're launching and things like that. So I'd say there's definitely like more inclusion. It depends on the situation. It isn't always that case, but I think like we're kind of past the stage of just being like a curiosity and like content design. Like, what is it? What does a content designer do? To like companies that have had content designers for a little while now, I think at more mature places, they're viewed as just product designers who work with words. And so um, that's a great distinction, I think, and kind of like hints at a company's maturity model a little bit if they kind of view content designers in that way and kind of the same level as a product designer. So that's something I've seen change, and definitely like working directly in designs is something that's changed. And when I first started, I was working in InVision and leaving comments for the designer to change copy within an InVision file, and so I didn't have like direct access to a design, and so Figma and some other tools have been it was kind of great and groundbreaking in that way for content designers. So we can actually like edit copy within a design and directly influence the way a design looks. So that's something that's changed, and it's been a great change. I've even had experience working in like a Google slide deck with a design, like a screenshot design, having to leave comments about what the change of the copy. And that's just not a great way to work if you're a content designer. So things have evolved since then, thankfully. So yeah, that's something that's changed. And I think like overall, for me anyway, this might be a personal thing, but I've definitely become like more aware of just like the business aspect of things and trying to follow trends within my company or just overall within the industry about where things are going. And early on, I'd say I was just kind of like focused on my little area or the particular teams I supported. I'm really trying to develop my thinking into a more like collective, like what does this all mean for the business, and what about the economic trends, like how is that going to affect my company going forward? And I try to listen to town halls with our CEO or try to follow on the news like what my company's stock price is doing, things like that. Definitely become more aware, and you realize how things like a decline in stock price affect maybe headcount in the future at your company and things like that. So definitely become more aware of those things. And those are some of the changes I've noticed over time.
All right, and there is a second part for this question, which is what would be the most important points to work on in a profile today to enter the sector?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Wow. I think definitely like showing an ability to work within a cross-functional environment seamlessly and being a good teammate in that regard and bringing different areas of the company together to accomplish a goal and as a content designer to push a design past the finish line, like that's important. I'd say like showing some kind of awareness, like we talked about business analytics earlier, like showing an awareness of how data is important in this whole discussion and about like measuring what you do, not only creating something but then having the data afterward and iterating if need be on what you've created based on what you've learned from your customers and their behaviors. I think that's important moving forward. And I also just think like we just don't know where everything's going. At least I don't. So I think just being nimble and someone who is able to kind of handle ambiguity or someone who can kind of be adaptable. I think that will be a timeless skill that will be needed in this role, no matter what form the role takes. I mean, I tell people all the time, like you don't necessarily need to learn specific tools because sometimes tools will change. Like it's good to learn them and to be aware of them, but like things change over time. But if you just have this learner's mindset and someone who's eager to be adaptable and forever changing, I think that will be a valuable thing moving forward because we just don't know and things change so fast. So those are a few things I'd point out with things that have changed and what might be important moving forward.
All right, I see a question here from Sandra from Bucharest. And I'm rewriting my question here. So I want to transition to UX writing. I'm also working on joining the academy next year. The UX writing academy. Okay, cool. Thank you. My question is, what are my chances of actually getting a job given the fact that I have zero experience and zero knowledge in the field? I know this was asked before, so bear with me. Okay, so I will take that question. It's about the UX writing academy. So basically, what the hiring managers are looking for or appreciate at least would be real world experience. So this is something that you get while working in the UX Writing Academy. And that's the one thing that increase your chance having that experience, even if it's only for a small project. And yeah, and that's about it. Regardless to that, And there are many things that are not necessarily related to training that will increase the likelihood of you to get a job, which is how you write your portfolio and design your portfolio, and the type of case studies that you have, and so on. And yes, that's about it. Definitely, training is not mandatory to get into the field. Sometimes, and for some people, this type of framework just help them to kind of accelerate their process and when getting into this field. So that's my take about that. I see here Henry that is asking, I was a journalist also. How did you sell your journalism experience to hiring managers when applying for content design positions? How well have those skills transferred?
Oh, I love that question. That's great. I love thinking back to that experience too, because I kind of touched on this earlier, but I really tried to lean into the cross-functional aspect of things because it's from what I've learned, even after transitioning careers, that cross-functional aspect of my journalism life has really been a good complement to what I'm doing now and really prepared me in a lot of ways for what I've done as a content designer. So I really talked about like working with editors, working with photographers, working with sources, and I've compared even my current role to like working a beat. I feel like a lot of feelings I have with like being the only content designer within a specific product area is relatable to what I did in my previous job, where I was like working with sources and different areas of a particular subject matter. So I kind of like talked about that during my uh, first like break-in experience a lot, and you kind of have to find the right hiring manager. I feel like too, this is something I also stress here today, like you can do everything quote unquote right, I feel like, if you're trying to break in, but sometimes it just won't happen if the hiring manager doesn't see it that way or isn't open to hiring a career changer. You really have to find the right person. I was lucky to find that when I broke in, but that was my strategy, kind of just like thinking about what aspects of that career at that time would translate to this new career I'm trying to break into. And then just kind of emphasizing my writing background too was important. But I think you don't have to be like a great long form writer to be like a content designer. You can just be someone who loves like solving problems and working with words and designing things and be a really good content designer. So I'd say like, if you're out there wondering if content design is for you and you feel like, oh, I don't know if if I like don't have experience writing long stories or something, like that's okay. Like if you're interested in this and like thinking about kind of the analytical aspect of things, like this would be a great career for you as well. So yeah, those are some of my lessons from breaking in back then.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you. We'll jump into the last question for today. We've documented all of them. I already copied them to a different document so we could answer the data
Nice,
supporting
yeah,
question
appreciate
later.
it. That's great. I love it.
And so the last question by Samantha Prebeck. What are the salary prospects? That's a tough one because there are so many people from so many countries. But I
Yeah.
will share our last salary survey as well. What are the salary prospects for UX writers and content designers? Is the role in high demand?
That's a really good question too, and I don't know if I have a great answer for that. It depends a lot, at least in the United States here, where you live. What salary content designers might command is based on cost of living adjustments, and different areas of the country are more expensive, and so you might see a pretty wide range in what the salary is being offered for specific positions. So I think it'll like continue to be kind of where it is now. I've seen some like decline a little bit in the past year or so, just based on all the layoffs and all the talent in the market now, good talent in the market. And so I think unfortunately in some cases companies have taken advantage of that to kind of offer a little lower salary than they did before. But I believe everything is cyclical. So eventually like things will go toward the candidates market again and we'll see a change in what we see currently. But yeah, I don't know. I wish I could read the future about that because I think it would be interesting to know the answer. But I think the role will evolve. I don't think it will be what it is now, in a few years, but I think there'll always be a demand for people who care about words and care about communicating clearly with customers. And there's definite business impact if you don't communicate clearly. So I think this role will always be in high demand in some form, but the way that form takes, I think, may be different than what it is currently, and it'll be interesting to see how that evolves in the future.
And do you feel like the role would evolve in a way that we will see more like content design directors also in companies and
Hmm.
that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think companies that value the discipline and are interested in building career paths for internal talent, and yeah, I think we've seen that already in some cases. So I think yeah, that'll continue to mature. Hopefully, we see more over time. I think there's definitely an opportunity in the industry to have more directors and even VPs, growing into those roles eventually, and even seeing content designers become like overall UX leaders over a whole design and function. I think those opportunities will be there in the future as this discipline matures. So we're still kind of a new kid on the block in a lot of ways, and that's good and bad. It can be frustrating, but also create a lot of opportunities. So I think we'll see in the future as this we mature in general, those opportunities develop for people as career opportunities expand.
Okay, that's great. And definitely seeing many people right now going into leadership roles in content design and UX writing. And in my opinion, it looks bright. It looks that people are, or at least now more than ever, or at least in the last couple of years, we've seen people getting even very decent pay wage. And you can check the salary survey also yourself and see. And I see some people here, Annie, is saying that in order, like, don't do it because of the money. In order to do it well, you need to love it. And I agree. As Andrew said, people that care about words, regardless what the title is, are going to get paid well. That's my opinion anyway. And the last word, Andrew, we are actually finished to 1 hour. That's actually, it was so fast. I felt like we
Yeah,
just started.
I know exactly. I feel like all these questions would be like a whole day, a marathon. It'd be great. It was so many good questions, but just thank you so much, everyone. I'd like to iterate again. I'm gonna try to get these questions and answer them over the next few weeks offline on LinkedIn. So let me know, yeah, if you'd like to see those, and follow me for sure. I've been dropping in my profile in the chat here, so connect with me. And yeah, definitely like happy to have everyone here. This was a really fun experience. I'd love to do it again sometime if y'all are ever interested. So yeah, stay in touch and best wishes with everything. And just know to yeah, take control of your future and be open and curious and see what happens, and good things will come your way.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a pleasure, as always, to have you here. And thank you, everyone, for sticking around. And I'm just dropping the link one last time to the UX Writing Academy.